Hello and welcome to the final episode of my trip down memory lane back to the Pacific Crest Trail and to my Thru-hike from exactly 10 years ago. I had originally planned to make 2 more episodes because there are actually 2 small sections left, one from Skykomish to Thru-hiking and then from Thru-hiking to, the Canadian border. But while looking through my pictures, I realized that I actually don't have that many memories of the section from Skykomish to Thru-hiking. I did take a ton of photos, but somehow I hardly remember what we actually did there. So I'm just going to sum it up all now. For this section, where I don't remember that much, we simply go through a slideshow of the most beautiful photos I took. And as I said, there are a lot of photos, so it must have been amazing. And of course, I do still remember that I really loved it there. But I just don't memorize specific things that we did, specific experiences that we made. And I think that's because during these last 2 weeks, but also really all through Washington, as I've said many times, I was just especially content. Nothing particularly dramatic or wild or whatever happened anymore. There were no big highlights like Mount Whitney or a border crossing or anything like that. It was simply an all-around perfect experience in Washington, and it was just beautiful. And I think because of that, I kind of settled into a kind of everyday calm state where I was just completely present in the moment and maybe didn't carry so many concrete memories of specific events with me, apart from maybe the blizzard we had on Knife's Edge. But things like that simply didn't happen anymore in these last 2 sections. And that, I think, the reason why I don't remember specific events of that time is just because I was so happy. And it doesn't diminish the experience at all. In fact, quite the opposite is the case in my mind. I think that during those last 2 weeks, I soaked up so much of the life out there in the wilderness that I reached an even deeper understanding, about this is where I belong, this is where I'm happy, and this is where I'm simply myself. So maybe I don't really remember what we did each day, but the feeling of that time, the deep sense of peace those 2 weeks gave me, that's something I absolutely still carry with me. But let's dive right in. We start right away with the slideshow I put together from the section between Skykomish and Thru-hiking, and you can already see the autumn colors. Fall had truly arrived, and I loved it. I adore when nature creates contrasts and the reds against the greens and then against the blue of the sky. It was gorgeous, so beautiful to look at. And I took countless pictures of red leaves and everything else. It was just pure joy walking through it all together with the others in my group. And it was a wonderful time to share those last 2 weeks together. And of course also the rest of Washington. In Washington, we'd mostly been lucky with the weather, except for a few days where we really had to deal with a blizzard and some heavy rain, but the forecast said we'd have pretty good weather for the rest of the journey. It just would be getting colder, but the sun was out all the time, and so we just enjoyed ourselves and the hike. And we simply set out into this breathtaking landscape and savored every moment we still had on the trail, knowing, of course, these were our final days out here, and life would soon change radically. It was a farewell to the trail, I would say, and the trail right to the end showed us everything it had to offer. One night we experienced a magnificent full moon. Normally, once it got dark, we were in bed pretty early. But we knew there would be a full moon that night, and we absolutely wanted to stay up to enjoy it in this incredible landscape. And it was amazing. Seeing a full moon out here is so much cooler than seeing it from the city. It was awesome. The clouds, the mountain silhouette against the moonlight. Eventually, it was so spectacular and so real, But eventually it got late, of course, and we went to bed, but that evening I remember quite well. And an even more spectacular moon moment was still to come. We then hiked through I think it's Glacier Peak Wilderness, a stunning region with incredible mountains, many glaciers, as the name suggests, and I couldn't get enough of it. It's always an absolute feast for the eyes to walk through such a landscape and see these ancient glaciers that are probably much smaller now than they were back then, which is tragic, of course. I know that from Norway. I've known specific glaciers for quite some time now, and every time I revisit, I can visually see the difference, and it's just sad. But I'm very grateful that I was able to walk there and enjoy it with such perfect weather. Many people actually hike through here in this terrain in the rain, and we were just incredibly lucky. On this section, we also spent a lot of time talking about the trail, about what we had experienced, how the trail had changed our way of thinking and stuff like that. And, you know, our little group of 4 had only really come together in Washington. We had met on day 1, as I said, but for most of the trail, we hiked alone or in our pairs as couples, only bumping into each other every now and then. So we had a lot of stories to share, lots of reflections on how the trail had shaped us, and I clearly remember many of those conversations during breaks or in the evenings, sitting in camp with a breathtaking mountain view, just looking back on what we'd all been through. And it was just wonderful, and there was an incredible sense of calm within our group. And by the end of such a long journey, you naturally become very thoughtful. Even if you're hiking with others, you are not talking all the time, of course. It's not possible. You're out of breath from the climbing all the time. So, but at the end of our hike, we shared those thoughts, and it was just beautiful. Yeah, and then came the second moon moment I mentioned earlier. The next night, I think it was, there was a lunar eclipse, a blood moon. And that was, of course, absolutely magical. It's a mystical experience on its own, but to witness it in complete wilderness was truly special. And we sat outside in our sleeping bags. It was freezing cold, and we watched the blood moon feeling completely wild and alive. And yeah, that was just a fantastic night that I still remember very, very well. Here's a funny picture of an outhouse with an amazing view. Even using the toilet becomes an event with a backdrop like that. But then we slowly made our way towards Thru-hiking, still surrounded by this fantastic landscape. And I remember several times reaching a pass and being absolutely blown away by the scenery. Those moments where you're pulled out of your meditative hiking rhythm by a brand new jaw-dropping view. It really felt like the trail wanted to show us everything it had one last time. And I was very thankful for that. Of course, there was also a lot of melancholy, knowing these were the final days of this incredible journey. And I was already thinking ahead, what would life be like after this? And I think everyone out there was, because finishing a trail like this is an even more radical change than starting it to begin with. In the beginning, you still have the civilization around you, the people, many people, and you're still kind of bound to your life in town or whatever. But here, after weeks in absolute wilderness, and Washington is wild, even compared to the Sierras apparently are more wild, but it didn't feel like it to me because there were so many people and so much trail infrastructure. And in Washington, it was really, well, to reach towns, you had to hitchhike for quite a while, and there were no real settlements nearby, just small resorts. And yeah, to think that we had to leave this incredible wilderness now to step back into the real world, especially a big city like Vancouver, which was ahead of us, was almost impossible to grasp back then. And it wasn't easy, I can tell you that much. It was quite a challenge to get used to the city again. Yeah, soon after, we took the bus down to Thru-hiking. It's just a tiny vacation spot, I guess, entirely geared toward tourism. And One of its most famous stops is the bakery, of course. We absolutely had to stop there. And oh man, the sticky buns with pecans were incredible. I stocked up a few to take back on the trail. I do remember that. They were so delicious. And in Thruhike itself, we stayed the night at the campground, and there we unexpectedly met a few hikers we hadn't seen in 5 months. And that's one of those magical things about the trail. These coincidences happen surprisingly often. It almost feels like beyond chance, running into people you thought you'd never see again. And yeah, it was just nice to meet back with these people that we had known from the very beginning, but hadn't seen in a long time, didn't even know they were still on trail. The next morning we set off again, and fall was now even more glorious than before. Vivid reds everywhere. The final section was once again stunning, with natural highlights like giant trees, truly massive compared to anything in Europe. There's no such thing as those trees in Europe, and I especially enjoyed seeing those magnificent plants. And also I loved the interplay of clouds and mountains that often made me feel like I was flying in an airplane. Washington delivered those moments right up to the end, and there were countless breathtaking views. I've said it before, but I will say it again. If you only have time for one section of the PCT, make it Washington. It's by far the most beautiful part of the entire trail. Yeah, and one morning we woke up to find that autumn had handed the reins over to winter. Everything was covered in snow, the trees, the ground, the tents, frosted trees, icy tents. It was absolutely gorgeous. It was super cold. I was so glad I had bought some snowboard socks in Skykomish, I think, and got an extra t-shirt from a hiker box to keep warm towards the end. But it felt amazing to wake up to this winter wonderland because, it was the perfect ending. We had experienced every single season on the trail, starting in spring, hiking through a very long summer, enjoying a touch of autumn, and now a taste of winter. That was just so wholesome, But the snow usually melted away by midday. But we had some more days of morning snow, I would say, coming. And as we hiked those final days, everyone was kind of lost in their thoughts, I guess. But we also joked around a lot, aware that our time together was almost over. We knew we might never see each other again in this exact group. 2 of us from Germany, 2 from Texas. And I mean, it's not easy to meet up across such distances. But we stayed in contact, and we even met once after the PCT 2 years later in Italy. And that was very nice. I hope to meet everyone again sometime, but until then we just have the internet for contact. But that's just how the PCT is. You form friendships that are very special, very deep, and yeah, some you will never see again, some you might stay in contact with, but that's just how it goes. Yeah, but then the last morning came, and we finally saw it, the border. A clear-cut line through the forest where nothing grows, and spotting it from above was a surreal moment. Suddenly, there it was, the end. And we just had to walk down there, and then we reached a monument. Some hikers who had arrived earlier formed a little tunnel with the trekking post for us to walk through, and it was overwhelming. It was triumph, pride, disbelief, but also fear and sadness, every emotion at once. And yeah, we just celebrated. We celebrated ourselves. We celebrated the trail. We celebrated life. And yeah, it was kind of unspectacular, the end. Also because we still had to walk some miles through Manning Park. But yeah, we just arrived there and that was it. But there was also that bittersweet realization this was truly the end. Tomorrow we would be doing something entirely different. And for me, that was frightening and sad, because this life in the wilderness is where I feel I truly belong. And I suspected that before from previous hiking trips, but the PCT definitely confirmed it completely. This is where I'm happiest. And now I did the GR11 a few weeks ago. It was only 5 weeks of hiking, a much shorter journey, but I felt it again. 5 months is of course another dimension, but the essence is the same. The Pacific Crest Trail is a life-changing journey. Maybe not quite on the level of having children or something like that, but I cannot think of anything more life-changing than doing such a long journey on your feet. And it changed how I see the world, what I consider important, and what I truly need to be happy, which, as it turned out, is almost nothing. And those realizations make living in normal society very hard. I never again felt so whole like I was on the trail, and the GR11 came close, so I know the feeling is still there, and I know that this is what I need to reach that state of happiness. And yeah, back then, after the PCT, I had big plans to keep hiking long trails, but life in society kind of pulled me back. My relationship ended, I moved to a new city, I started a job that didn't fulfill me, but now I'm at the point where I feel that pull again, the need to go back out for a long time. But it's hard once you've built a social life around you, you know? It's a double-edged sword. Still, I know that sooner or later I will set out on another long journey, because creating the series and hiking the GR11 reminded me how much I need it. Life will take its course, but I will always keep hiking. And the PCT only strengthened that resolve to walk, to live in nature, to embrace that life. And I can only encourage all of you to try something like this yourself. The PCT might not be the easiest option right now if you're from outside of the US, but there are spectacular trails in Europe and elsewhere. For example, the GR11, where we are starting the vlogs this Sunday. But if you're in the US, the PCT is awesome. Do it as long as you can. Do it as long as it's there, and as long as the climate still allows to hike such a trail. It is a life-changing experience. And yeah, I'm very thankful that I was able to hike this trail, that I was able to meet all these wonderful people on the trail, to see this amazing landscape. And I just hope that everyone can, at least once in their lifetime, experience something like that. Last but not least, I would like to thank you for watching this series. And as I said, if you're interested, subscribe to the channel and tune in on Sunday. I'll be posting 2 episodes per week of my GR11 Thru-hike, Sundays and Fridays. It will be in German, but with English subtitles. So I'm very much looking forward to show you this incredible trail, which actually is very alike the PCT in many places. And yeah, I'm really excited, and I hope you are too. So see you on the GR11. Ciao!